Wonderful. Okay, so let's get back into the second part of Unit 3. And I'd love to get back in here and just make a few adjustments where I'd like to set up another paragraph here, but I'm going to call it my div, and because I'm going to change it, and then I'm going to call this my other div. Now, this word div is a really big deal, and I want to talk about that as we go forward. It's going to change the way you do a lot of web development. You know, the presence of the div is big. This JSON, I'm going to keep this here like nothing ever happened. And then I'm going to keep my object, part 2, I'm going to keep it. And then for this big item right here, I'm just going to delete that. And instead of, commenting it out, which gets, you realize that comments are really great, but you kind of want to get them out of the way. Like, I love your comments, but please don't, obfuscate my, don't get in the way of my nice coding with that comment. Does that make sense? So, your comments should be well out of the way. So why don't we knock out, this stuff right there too, and let's just kind of start our third demo from a really even keel, like easy place. But let's say that we have an output div that's going to be equal to we're going to do get element by ID, and we're going to paint the contents of that JSON into my div, which is up here. So this kind of gives us control over that that element. Now, when you think about, well, why do you call it div? Like, that's just a paragraph. That's not a div. The div. The div tag is there inside of HTML. Div is kind of the building block of modern web design. Everything is a div when it comes to, and so I feel like everything tough in JavaScript is all about get element by ID and then the for loop. That's the hardest part. If you can live with that, you're living with the hard stuff. You're mastering. When it comes to web development, or web design rather, div is the spirit and the soul of web design. So that, again, if you're going to web design with the intent of being comfortable with divs, you're going to be a master, okay? But for now, you don't get to learn about that just yet. We're just going to say that div is out there and that we're going to get there. We're going to conquer it in a very no big deal way, okay? But what I do want to say is your data has been, oh, and you know what? I need to add something here. We used to call this obj, but I want to begin to call that data. Because I want to begin to say, go ahead and look into the data, into that employees array. And for each element within that array, I want you to treat each line by calling each line an element. An element is a keyword. I could say that's, call each line of that array whatever you want. I'm going to just call it element because that's what comes to mind. And I want to write a little function where I'm going to say to the console, go ahead and log the element that appears within each line. And you know that we love console. Console's our buddy. Console is like a little tool that we have to soften this entire task. And so you're looking inside of the employees array that we start right here. And for every line, I want you to loop through that. That's the for each. And then I want you to run this little function right there. And so there's going to be an end to that. Now, if you wanted to write this differently, you probably could. And many times, JavaScript developers do this. And they kind of stack this together like this. This is basically what's happening. And in order to get this really right, you need to understand that this long and difficult statement is taking place. We're going to run a for loop, and for each element of that for loop, we're going to run this function. So let's just break that up a little bit, because I think for the undergrad you want something a little bit more legible. You know, the best schools simply make tough stuff understandable. But that's roughly, when you take it apart a little bit, that's what's happening. And I get that the brackets and such are imposing. You notice that there's not one of these. Because each of the executable statements are finished with a colon right here. And so let's go into, my bad. Let's create a new file. Sorry if that's disruptive. You can keep your unit3 one if you want. For my purposes, I'm just going to make a unit3.2 for each intro.html. And I'm just going to paste that in there so it's distinct. And we'll move this all over a little bit. So let's go look on the desktop for ForEach intro and make sure it's doing what I need it to do. And let's get on in there. And I forgot that I'm writing everything to the console. So let's say, well, when I inspect the element, I should see lots happening in the console. And so you recall that I said, well, for every element within employees, just take the element and log it to the console. That's fine. So here you can see each of the elements are being logged. Now I'm really happy about that because I can see, oh, well, I just grabbed a bunch of internet, data from the internet, or maybe I don't know what the package looks like, and now I can see that there's the key first name has this value, key last name has this value, and there is a object prototype that's established there. And so now I can begin to program with the content inside of that package, assuming that JSON is the kind of delivery package for the internet. But as you can see, there's nothing there. It's all behind the scenes in the console. So I respect you as you guys go through your micro projects. I really respect when you guys run the console and there's data behind the scenes and you're just kind of making decisions as to what you want to do with the data. But getting the data is a big part of being a success story. Naturally, you follow up with putting in an array and parsing the array. But remember what I said, that programming at a programmer developer level has everything to do with mastering and being comfortable with arrays. But the most productive array that we have right now is the ForEach. So for each element within this mess, we're going to do this. So you know that you're going good right there. And sometimes when you get things running okay, you can kind of put a little okay there. Later you're just going to comment out all that because this was just to test the waters. So let's run some production code that the public should see. So you know that if you call data employees and you run a for each upon that, and then you apply a function to each line of the JSON, where you call each line the element, and you kind of repeat. Go ahead and grab one of the divs, like my other div up top, and then go ahead and set that inner HTML just like you all have been doing. And you can use the next line and say, grab element dot first name, just like you did a minute ago, plus element dot last name, and then you add maybe another character just to sweeten the deal, just to prove to yourself that you're doing it. And then I'm going to finalize that this way. Now, JavaScript won't complain about this, and I'm going to debug this in a minute. And let me just see that I've got it going perfect. Giving me a little error right there, and you can see that what I would like to do is I think I reused element, and that's a mistake. So instead of using element, I'm just going to use item. Indeed, it's probably good that I make some mistakes up here just so that you see how I work through the problems. And what else did I get wrong? Yeah, you can see here that I have an additional okay, let's see wherever I made any issues. Get on by ID. Oh yeah, that's a problem. Sometimes the adrenaline takes over and you make mistakes. Fast. My other div. Great. All right, so we're looking like something's happening here. And obviously, I'm writing a lot, and I'm grabbing the content. So here I'm writing to the console all of my data, and then I'm grabbing the interior of this. Now you realize that my only issue is I'm running ForEach upon this array, but I'm only getting one result. Wouldn't you expect me to have 3 different results? Because I'm iterating the and the issue is that first I do John Doe, then I do Anna Smith, then I do Peter Jones. And so what remains is the last item. So I keep overwriting that div until I get to the end of the array. And you realize this is a little bit limiting. So I'm going to need to do something a little more compelling. And so in the next video, I want to go through probably some of the biggest blocks of code that we've done thus far, but that will get you guys into the position that you're kind of hungry to get into, which is how do I create the page where there's one new paragraph for every element in the data? And then how do I create interactivity within that data? So we'll go into our final demo that way. So go ahead. I'm going to leave this up here, and I'll let you do that, and then I'll get into the next video in a sec.